Welcome to Bad Kids Don't Exist, the podcast that helps adults better understand kids so they and their caregivers can thrive. I'm Stuart Perry, but you can call me Mister Stu. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a child therapist, and an autism spectrum disorder clinical specialist. And I'm here to answer your questions with one goal: to help you connect with the kids in your life in ways that bring more understanding and less stress. Today's questions touch on some of the most common struggles parents and teachers are facing right now, whether it's understanding the role of medication, setting boundaries that work, or even exploring trends in mental health. My answers are designed to shed new light on these topics and empower you to feel more confident in your approach. So stick around, because by the end of today's live session, I hope you'll walk away with real tools and insights to make your journey with kids a little smoother and a lot more joyful. I'm so excited to be talking with you today. I have some fantastic questions about some things that I am really passionate about. So I am so excited to share them with you today. I'm going to jump right into the first question. If you don't know, you can send questions in to me all throughout the week. You can send questions in on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and email. On YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, it's at Mister Stu TV. On YouTube, you can find any video and comment, or you can send a message on YouTube. On Facebook and Instagram, you can either send a direct message or leave a comment. And I and my team review those throughout the week, and we sort through and just find some questions about some things that either we see coming up repeatedly or some things that we think are really, really important. So make sure you send in your questions that way. Or if you don't follow on social media, which you should, but if you don't follow on social media, or if for some reason you'd rather send an email, you can send an email to question@MrStuTV.com, and I and my team are happy to review those as well. I'm ready to jump into question number one for today. Again, I'm just so excited that you all have been writing in, and I hope that these answers have been helpful for you. If, as you're watching this video, you're like, wow, this is some helpful stuff, please like the video and subscribe on whatever channel you're watching, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Make sure that you like and subscribe. That helps me a whole lot. It helps me know what content is most beneficial for you, and it also helps others be able to find the content that they might need. So please make sure to like and subscribe as we go along together. Let's jump into question number one. This question came in on Instagram. Here's the question. Dear Mr. Stu, my 9-year-old has been on ADHD medication for a few months now. At first, we saw some improvement, but lately his teacher mentioned he's having a harder time focusing again. She suggested we might need to increase the dose, but I'm wondering if medication is the only factor here. Are we maybe relying on the medication too much to solve things? How should we think about this when trying to support him? This is one that comes up in my office every single day, whether it be parents asking about medication or whether it be teachers calling in to discuss students who might need medication. You are correct that it does sound like you might be relying too much on medication as what is making the difference for your child. There are a lot of things to consider. Let me give you just a real basic breakdown of my philosophy on medication. And no, I'm not a prescribing doctor, so I'm not one that can make adjustments to medication, and I'm not the only person that you should listen to about medication. But with mental health medication, there is only one medication in all of mental health that was designed for children. All other mental health meds that are prescribed to children are adult mental health medications that we are hoping will work for children. And there hasn't been too long that we've been trying that out. So keep that in mind. And just know that medication is for times of danger. Either the child is dangerous to themselves or to others, or distress, where they really cannot function because of this disorder that's going on in them. If it's just discomfort, either the child is uncomfortable or their teacher is uncomfortable, that is not a reason to medicate a child. But to get directly to your question, you said that the child saw some progress and then some. Now they're showing some regression in that progress, and that the teacher recommended upping the dose of medication. Just like I said, medication is not my job. Medication is not a teacher's job. A teacher should not be saying that a child needs to change anything about their dosage of medication. They can report specifics. They can say, hey, it seems like they are struggling more to focus. Or, hey, it seems like really they are on track. Or, hey, it seems like every time, every day around this time, this starts to happen. But they should not be recommending anything about medication. That is just, it's just not their job. Just like it's not my job to change anything about medication, it's not a teacher's job to change anything about medication. So just because they have said there might need to be a dosage change does not mean that there needs to be a dosage change. And this also goes into something that I see all the time, that people they put too much on relying on medication, or they believe too much about the medication, or they believe that the medication is what's doing all of the work. So when children are on medication and they're doing well, they praise the medication and not how hard the child is working on the medication. Or when things start to not go well, they start to blame the medication and not the system that might be in place that is causing it to be so difficult for the child to be successful. Medication does not in and of itself change behavior. Medication provides a framework for the brain so that the brain can reach a baseline level so that the child can then make better decisions, or so that they are prepared for certain things. But medication does not change behavior. If a child's behavior is improving, it is because the child is working harder. And if a child's behavior is starting to regress, it doesn't necessarily mean that the child isn't working hard or that the medication isn't doing what it's supposed to do. It could just be that the system that is set up for the child is one where they are unable to be successful. In schools today, we ask kids to sit still and be quiet all day long. For 8 hours of the day, children are expected to just sit still and be quiet. That is not a developmentally appropriate expectation of children. And I will scream it from the rooftops. That is not a developmentally appropriate expectation of children. Children should be given breaks. Children should be allowed to move. Children should be allowed to play. Children should be allowed to do a lot of things. And so if it's just this 9-year-old child is not able to sit still and be quiet for an entire school day, that doesn't mean that medication is failing. It doesn't mean that the child is not working hard. It may mean we need to adjust our expectation of children sitting still and being quiet for 8 hours of a day. I am a well-adjusted adult, and I do not sit still and be quiet for 8 hours a day. And I think you would be hard-pressed to find even an adult in today's world who sits still and is quiet for 8 hours of the day. So we don't need to expect that of children either. But if the child is doing better, praise them. Don't say, oh, I'm so glad the medication is working, because then that tells the child, oh, you must not be putting in any effort at all. Or it tells the child, if anything happens, we are to blame it on the medication. None of this is your fault at all. We can't set up those systems. So if the child is doing well, let's look at how hard that child is working and how hard the teachers in that child's life are working to provide supportive environments for that child to thrive. If the child starts to regress, let's not first look to just crank up a dosage of medication, because again, that's not even medication's job. But let's look and see, hey, are there some other things that we can try before we may need to adjust a medication? Are there just some expectations that are unrealistic? Are there some other things, like can we allow the child to fidget? Can we give them some movement breaks? Can we do any number of other things before we add on medication? Don't praise medication for positive change, and don't blame medication for regression when it happens. Look at the full system and don't give medication that much credit. Hopefully that was a helpful answer. If it was, make sure to like this video and subscribe on whatever channel you might be watching so that more people can find it and so that I know that it was helpful for you. Thanks so much for writing in. Yes, medication. It's just one of those things that I feel like I got to talk about as often as I can. Just a little side note, the CDC has reported that 14% of children in America are on mental health medications. And again, only one medication, mental health medication, was designed for children. All of the others are just a big experiment. So we've got to be very careful and cautious and hold back as much as we can before we prescribe a medication that wasn't even intended for a child, because then those medications also have side effects, and then you're going into this tangled web of things. So if medication is required because of danger or distress, I get it, but also work with your prescribing psychiatrist or physician to talk with them about what are the things where we can know the child is ready to start backing off and eliminating that medication over time, because we don't want them to just be taking a pill forever. We want them to know that they can do it too, when at all possible. There are some people who are on medication for their life. There's no shame in that. But if there are milestones that we can watch for to say, okay, they're ready now, let's back it off. Or, hey, they're ready now, let's try them without medication. Always be talking with the doctor to be watching for those things so that the child is not dependent on medication. Thanks so much. Let's look at question number 2. This question came in on Facebook. It's Facebook at Mister Stu TV on Facebook. Here is the question. Oh, yes, this is a great one. Man. Oh, here we go. Dear Mr. Stu, my 13-year-old recently told me she thinks she has social anxiety and may even be on the autism spectrum because she sometimes feels nervous around people and has trouble paying attention in class. I know it's good that she's aware of her feelings, but I'm also worried about this culture where kids are diagnosing themselves or even competing over who has the most mental health struggles. How can I help her take her concerns seriously without getting swept up in this trend? Great question. This is one that I see often, and it used to be really this way with medical doctors, and maybe it still is. I have a friend who is a medical doctor, and I had to go see them one time because I had dislocated my shoulder, and on their wall there was a cartoon that said, yes, your WebMD is just as equal to my medical degree, or something like that. I completely botched that. I'm so sorry. But that's kind of what we're seeing in mental health now too. I cannot tell you how many teenagers have come into my office and have told me the diagnosis that they think that they have because they saw it on TikTok or because they saw it on Love on the Spectrum or whatever it might be, that they come in and they're like, oh, I have these symptoms. I know this is what I have. This is it. This is my diagnosis. And they panic. And sometimes they're very nervous and sometimes they want a certain diagnosis. It could be any number of things, but I see it all the time where kids kind of, they'll watch something and then they believe that they know enough to have diagnosed themselves with a mental health diagnosis. Just so you know, as therapists, I cannot even diagnose myself with a mental health diagnosis. I'm also not allowed to diagnose anyone that I know with a mental health diagnosis of any kind. There are tons of reasons for that, but basically our perspective of ourselves and those we know are skewed. It's different. And Becca, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sending in the stars and for sending that approval. Thank you so much for that. That helps me a whole lot. But as we're talking about kids diagnosing themselves, It is very common in today's world that kids will see something or read something and then believe that that is the thing that they've got going on. So it is important to validate kids' feelings and validate their thoughts about themselves, but not get swept up in that trend of, oh, yes, it must be that you have social anxiety and that you're on the autism spectrum because yes, you're right. Here's what's going on. You have to have gone to school and have a degree to be able to diagnose those things. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of nuance to diagnoses. There's a lot of different things that look like different diagnoses. And just because someone sees certain symptoms does not mean they meet the criteria for a full diagnosis. And just because someone is experiencing symptoms of things doesn't mean they have a disorder. If you have looked at or read my book, this is my book. It's called Putting the Pieces Together, Understanding and Supporting Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder. In this book, I talk about how really everyone is on the autism spectrum. It's just where you're at on the autism spectrum. Does that cause a disorder? Are you at a level on the spectrum that causes disorder for you? The same can be true of anxiety. Everyone experiences anxiety, but is the consistency that you're experiencing anxiety and the level that you're experiencing anxiety, is that causing a disorder for you? Or with attention difficulties or focus problems, people talk about ADHD, but it could just be that whatever they're trying to look at is boring, or whatever they're being asked to pay attention to is of no interest to them at all. That's not ADHD, that's just boredom. So there's a lot of nuance in diagnoses, but you can absolutely validate your daughter's emotions. If she says, I think that I have social anxiety, you can say, oh, what are the things that make you feel like that? And she might say, well, every time that I'm out with my friends, I just get really nervous thinking about how they are feeling, and I just don't know what people are thinking about me, and it just makes me very uncomfortable. Oh, wow, I didn't know that about you. Tell me some of the things that you think people are thinking of you. Then you're having this beautiful conversation with your daughter about her thoughts and about her emotions and about how she's feeling, and letting her share those things with you without getting swept up into this, oh, this is my diagnosis and this is what I know it is. Now, if you hear anything that is very concerning as your daughter discusses things with you, or if this becomes a consistent pattern of maybe over time she feels less and less like she can go out with her friends because she has these thoughts and feelings about being out with them, well, then it might be time to go see a professional and see if there is a diagnosis. Do you see that difference there? This beautiful conversation you have with your child might be all the support that she needs. The other side of it is that you then, because you are having this beautiful, amazing, open conversation with your child, you can listen for any red flags that tell you she needs some extra professional support. Then you can go and get her that help. So it is all about validating those feelings without being swept up into, oh, yes, this is your diagnosis. Yes, this is what it is. It doesn't have to go that far. It can just be like, oh, it does sound like you have some social anxiety. That's different than you have social anxiety disorder. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I want to say one more quick thing about children diagnosing themselves. And you mentioned that kids are sometimes excited to have this discussion with each other about who has the most mental health difficulties, that they're trying to outdo each other in that. That is a huge problem. And I'll just say it, it is a huge problem for our kids today. It is so great that we have this open dialogue about mental health. I am so excited that I get to come on here and discuss this with you all. But when kids are trying to outdo each other with how much difficulty they're going through, most of the time, what they're really saying is, here's the reason why I should be excused for the disruptive things I do. Or here's the reason why I should be excused from these expectations of me. And we do need to allow children to voice their concerns and share their thoughts and share their feelings. And if they have a diagnosis, we need to support them in all the ways that we can. But we do need to remind them that a diagnosis can explain disruptive behaviors or explain why certain expectations may be difficult for them, but it does not excuse disruptive behaviors, and it does not necessarily excuse them from meeting certain expectations. Keep that in mind, because that is really where our world has gone today of, oh, I have anxiety, so that means I just don't have to do any work. No. You have anxiety, so you're going to need some support, and sometimes you're going to feel uncomfortable because of your anxiety, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have to get the work done. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have to present in front of class. You're still going to have to present in front of class, and that might be very uncomfortable for you, but we're going to be here for you. We're going to cheer you on. Maybe I let some people go up there and sit with you, whatever it might be, but you're still going to have to meet the expectation. Don't let diagnoses or mental health difficulties excuse children from things that are developmentally appropriate expectations of them. Because then they will start to fight about who has the most disorder, because they see that having the most disorder gets you out of the most things. Explain, not excuse, and validate your child's thoughts and feelings. Hopefully that was helpful. If it was, make sure to like this video and subscribe on whatever channel you're watching so that more people can find this and so that I know that this content is helpful. Let's see, I'm going to go over on Facebook. Man, Facebook is blowing up. Becca, I want to thank you again for the stars that you sent. That is so helpful and really means a whole lot to me. Let me read your comment here. I'm going to read it out loud. My oldest daughter is diagnosed autistic. My younger daughter has some similar traits, though there are differences. Is it common for a sibling to have learned behaviors from their autistic sibling while being neurotypical? By the way, you gave me a copy of your book at the Virginia Head Start Convention, and I love it. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Becca, thank you so much, and thank you for looking at the book. I do hand out copies. If you see me live somewhere, it is likely that I have some copies with me that I'm going to be handing out if you'll answer a question or volunteer for something. So thank you so much for checking out that book. But let me address your question. You were asking if siblings of neurodivergent children can sometimes pick up behaviors from their neurodivergent siblings, even though they are more neurotypical. And I say more neurotypical because let me tell you this, neurotypical is overrated. It's not a real thing. Nobody's brain works perfectly exactly the way that we learn it from a science book or an anatomy lesson. Nobody's brain is perfect. There is more neurotypical and there is more neurodivergent, but there is no perfect neurotypical brain. Short answer. You asked if siblings can pick up behaviors from their neurodivergent siblings, even though they are more neurotypical. Yes, of course. This happens in all sibling pairs and all sibling sets, regardless of more neurotypical, more neurodivergent. Kids pick up other kids' behaviors because it's adaptive. A lot of times, children are trying to see what is going to get the most attention and care from their caregiver. So one way to think of it is if you are flooding one child with a ton of attention because of a behavior, expect that the other children are going to start showing some of that behavior. Whether that attention is positive or negative, children's brains just kind of want attention because that tells them that they're being cared for. So if they are seeing, oh, my sibling, every time they do this thing, they get a ton of attention, then their brain is going to start to say, maybe we should start to do that thing. And that's true of all sibling sets, more neurotypical, more neurodivergent. It happens all over the place. So what you can do is a few things. One is you want to ignore disruptive behavior as much as possible, but let me be very clear. You want to ignore the behavior, not the child. You don't want to ignore the child while they are exhibiting the behavior. You want to ignore the disruptive behavior that they're showing. Let me give an example. If a child is throwing a tantrum and they are screaming and cussing and banging on the ground, and then they stop banging on the ground, what I am going to say to that child is, oh, wow, I see you quit banging on the ground. Great job. You're getting in control of yourself. Do you see? I'm not ignoring the child, but I did completely ignore the disruptive behavior until it changed into a more positive or appropriate response behavior. Then maybe they are still screaming, but they're no longer cursing. Then I'm going to say, oh, wow, you stopped banging and you stopped using those really tough words. Now all you're doing is screaming. Great job. Wow, you are really getting in control of yourself. Do you see? I'm not ignoring the child, but I am ignoring the behavior. What that will show that child and their siblings is I get more attention, or they get more attention, which means I will get more attention when I do the more positive thing. Mommy highlights when they do the positive thing. So, oh, I want to do that positive thing. It seemed like they were being ignored for that disruptive thing they were doing. Oh, so I don't want to do that. But the moment they stopped doing that thing, wow, mommy flooded her with tons of attention. So there you are ignoring the disruptive behavior, but not ignoring the child. You also may need to have a conversation with your more neurotypical child about how every child is different. And I had a science teacher in high school who said, there is nothing more unfair than the equal treatment of unequals. And that is a really tough lesson for kids to learn. There is nothing more unfair than the equal treatment of unequals. What that means is everybody needs support in different ways. And if we treat every person exactly the same at all times, that's not fairness, even though it's equal. So you can have a conversation with your other child and say, yeah, sometimes, let's say it's a sensory sensitivity thing. Sometimes when we're at the grocery store, she starts to scream because it feels so overwhelming for her. So I know that you don't usually feel that way. Do you think you could come along with me and help her know that she's still safe, even though she hears that buzzing from the lights in the grocery store? Or whatever it might be. Now you're working with your child and showing them, hey, this is something that your sibling needs support for. It is not something that I'm just excusing and just saying like, oh, well, that's just the way it's always going to be. They just need some support right now. So do you think that you could help me with them? Oh, wow, thank you so much. That you were being such a nice sister to them. Thank you so much for that. Now you are working with them and letting them see that they get attention even when it seems like their sibling is the one getting all the attention and they get some of the attention too. That's really where that picking up of behaviors comes from. And again, it happens with all kids. Myself and my brothers, we picked up behaviors from each other. Everybody picks up behaviors from everybody that we're around, not just siblings, but we just kind of look at people and are like, ooh, I like that one, or ooh, it looks like they really got a lot of attention for that, or ooh, whatever it might be. So it's not just a neurotypical, neurodivergent thing. It happens with all kids and all people a lot of the time. We are social creatures. Hopefully that was helpful. Becca, thank you so much for writing in. Thank you for reading the book. And thank you for being so kind with your words. Hopefully that was a helpful answer. If it was, feel free to let me know. And if it wasn't, feel free to write me a follow-up, and I'm happy to follow up even more about it. Great. All right. Let's go on to, yeah, I've got 3 more prepared questions. Let's see here. Question number 3. Oh, here we go. Dear Mr. Stu, I really want my 6-year-old to make better choices, so I try to be on top of everything he does. I remind him constantly, follow him around to keep him on track, and often step in before he makes mistakes. The problem is he's starting to resist me more and gets frustrated anytime I tell him what to do. I feel like I'm losing control, but I'm afraid that if I back off, he'll just fall apart. What should I do? Short answer, you gotta back off. I know you were waiting for it. That's the answer. You've got to back off. What can happen when you are constantly trying to control a child, because you cannot control a child, but trying to control a child is over time, they will start to say like, well, I don't need to learn how to control myself because mommy or daddy is going to just do all this for me. If anything's about to happen, they're just going to stop me from doing it. I don't need to learn the boundaries. I don't need to learn any of this. They got it handled. And you said that you are afraid that if you back off, he'll fall apart. Well, guess what? If you do this for too much longer, or if you do it for too long into his life, and then you one day do have to back off because he has to go to school, or he has to go off to camp, or he's going to learn to play a sport or whatever, and you are not right there, he will fall apart because you have been the one keeping him all together rather than teaching him how to keep himself together. It's a difficult thing to explain, but the more you try to control children, the more you're going to have to try to control children. Because the more you control them, they don't just fall in line and start to just behave the ways that we are trying to control them to behave. What will actually happen is, as you are experiencing now, you said that he's starting to resist you more and getting frustrated more. What's actually happening is his brain is pushing back on that. His brain is saying, I am not going to just always do this. Or what can happen is, ooh, I wonder if they'll also correct me if I do this. Ooh, I wonder if they can also correct me if I do this. Ooh, I wonder if they can also correct me if I can do this. And they are trying to find the limit of how far they can push things to the point where you can no longer control them, because it's a safety thing. It's not them trying to say, ooh, I want to see how far I can go. It's, okay, well, if they are going to be the ones to control me, I need to see how far this goes because I need to know where the safe limit is. So they will actually push it all the way up, and you will see more disruptive behaviors, more frequent disruptive behaviors, and more pushes back on that attempt to control, because they are wondering, how long are they going to be able to control me? If this is the thing keeping me in control, if this is the thing keeping me safe, I need to know the limit of that control and that safety. The best thing you can do is provide the least amount of support as possible to allow children to still be successful. There's a mantra that I love to teach, and it is, I will do what you can't do. I won't do what you won't do. I will do what you can't do, but I won't do what you won't do. I will step in and help you with something that you cannot do, literally cannot do. It would be developmentally inappropriate to ask you to do that thing. But I won't do something just because you won't do it. If you can put on your shoes, but you can't tie them, okay, you're putting them on, I'm tying them. If you can do zippers, but not buttons, okay, I'll do the zippers, you do the buttons. If it is, you know how to fill up a cup with water, but you can't reach the glasses, okay, I'll get the glass down for you, but you are going to be the one to fill it up. What that does is empowers children to know that they are capable of controlling themselves and doing a lot of things on their own. As parents and as caregivers, as difficult as it might be, our job is to set children up to no longer need us anymore. It is the best and saddest part of my job when I get to successfully discharge a client from my services, because what it tells me is they don't need me anymore. And isn't that both a beautiful and very difficult thing for me to accept? Yes, it is. It is very beautiful and very difficult. As a parent, your job is the same. Build up in your children and allow your children to see that they are not going to need you forever. And the way to do that is to allow them to need you less every single day. So you said you keep them from making mistakes. Stop. If it's just going to be a mistake and it's not going to be something that is dangerous to them, like causing significant injury to themselves or someone else, let them make the mistake and let them learn from the mistake. You said about making better choices. You tell them which choice to make. Don't do that. Let them try to figure out which choice to make. Let them try it, and then let them deal with the consequences of their choice. Those lessons are how kids learn. It's not cruel to allow a child to experience some discomfort so that they can learn lessons as they live and as they grow and as they develop. It is very healthy and very necessary for them to experience that. So, if you are trying to control your child, but remember, the only person you can control is you. Now, you might be able to grab your child, you might be able to carry them somewhere, or whatever it might be. Guess what? You are still not in control of them. Their mind is in control of them and their responses. It's our job to help children learn to control themselves, not our job to try to control children. And the more you try to control them, the more you're going to have to try to control them as they test those boundaries and as they just get frustrated because the message we are sending them as we try to control them more is you are not capable. Don't send that message. Send the message, I will do what you can't do. I won't do what you won't do. And that might be different every single day because what you can do should increase a little bit more each day as you grow and develop. So each day I'm going to back off a little bit more so that one day you don't need me anymore. Hopefully that answer was helpful. If it was, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out and so that other people can find this video if it is helpful. Great. All right, I've got 2 questions left here, and I do think I've got some time to be able to take those. Yeah, I'm going to jump in. 2 more questions. All right. Dear Mr. Stu, my teenager has ADHD and told me his friends are encouraging him to try marijuana to relax and chill out. I'm against this, but when I tried to explain why, he said I didn't understand. I know marijuana causes the munchies, and I'm guessing it impacts the brain too. How can I explain to him why marijuana is especially concerning for someone with ADHD? Wow. You said that your child was not receptive to the answer that you gave. I'm not sure the answer that you gave, but let me give you my answer. Marijuana and really also addictions, like any type of addictions, are very common and very prevalent in individuals who have ADHD. Let me try to explain it just a bit. ADHD, people think of it as this focus and attention problem. It is not a focus or attention problem. That is the symptom. The problem is in the brain of someone with ADHD, their brain does not give this reward chemical. The chemical is called dopamine. And dopamine helps us feel good about things. Now, for people who do not have ADHD, what that means is as they are, for instance, working on a worksheet of math problems, as they're working, their brain kind of gives them some of this reward chemical for every answer that they write down. That as they're working through the worksheet, their brain is giving this reward chemical saying, good job, you are making it through, you are getting to the end, you're doing this, yeah, great, good job, great work. For a person with ADHD, their brain does not give that same level of dopamine. Their dopamine level is depleted. So their brain is not constantly encouraging them and not constantly rewarding them for the work that they're doing. That is what makes it so hard to focus. It's not focus in and of itself. It is that as they are focusing, they are not being rewarded for it as much as someone who is more neurotypical or who has that typical level of dopamine response. It is the same for focusing, for paying attention, for reading. uh, reading, as someone is reading, for someone who's more neurotypical, as they're reading, their brain is saying, "Ooh, this is a good story. Good job. Oh, another word, another line. Yes, you are doing a great job of reading that." People with ADHD, their brains don't work that way. Theirs has to feel like it finished a task, like they finished something. They finished a chapter. And then the person with ADHD might look and say, "Ah, oh, this chapter is 10 pages long. That is a lot of work for just a little bit of reward. I'm just going to go over here to the TV or to the phone where reward is just bing, 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 more and more and more and more and more." The reason that matters is because marijuana is a dopamine accelerant. That means that it floods the brain with dopamine. As someone smokes marijuana, their brain is being flooded with that dopamine. That is actually why, at least used to be, all of the perception of individuals who use marijuana are being shifted. So let me say that what I'm about to tell you is an old perspective of people who smoke. Um, Now it is very well understood that there's a lot of people who smoke marijuana on a very regular basis and are still able to live successful lives. I'm not going to get into perspectives on that or anything like that. That's for another day, another time. But here you can know what happens and why the perception used to be that people would just smoke marijuana and then just sit on their couch and not want to do anything, is because as the brain is flooded with that dopamine, with that reward, with that pleasure chemical, it says, well, we don't need to do anything. I've got all the reward I need right here. So the person would smoke, and then they could just kind of crash out on the couch and still feel okay about themselves because their brain was already getting flooded with that reward and that pleasure chemical. They didn't need to go seek it by achieving anything. They could just sit and relax. You mentioned the munchies. Let me tell you where the munchies comes from. Munchies come from as the brain's dopamine level starts to come down, it says, "Ooh, I don't like that this is coming down. I want it to go back up." Well, junk food also floods the brain with dopamine. It's also why people with depression will seek out junk foods, because their dopamine level is coming down and they want to boost it back up. So as that level is coming down, the brain's like, let's go find the saltiest, greasiest, grossest, worst thing for me. And then the dopamine level will go back up. It's that crash of dopamine that makes someone want to go find some gross but amazing snack food with the munchies. The reason that can become a problem, especially for individuals with ADHD, is because then they will become dependent on that substance to be the dopamine for them. And then when their brain is not feeling that heightened level of dopamine, they can feel a crash where it becomes even harder for them to focus and even harder for them to work hard, because it's like, you know what? I don't need to do any of this. At the end of the day, I'm going to get to go smoke and my brain's going to get all it needs anyway. So that is the real trouble and the real problem that can happen when someone with ADHD also uses substances like marijuana and is self-medicating. And a lot of times they don't even know it. They just think, I just feel so fidgety and I feel like I'm being run by a motor. I just need to chill out. Well, there are some other ways to do that. Physical exercise is a great way to still get that burst of dopamine, wear out some of that energy, and still be able to sleep at night. It's harder, and it doesn't just happen instantly. It's got to be a consistent thing. And in today's world, we want these instant quick fixes, and marijuana to someone with ADHD looks like the instant awesome quick fix. But over time, it will actually make life without marijuana even more difficult. And really, no one wants to be dependent on something. There's all this research and discussion about whether someone can be addicted to marijuana or addicted to cannabis. And the research is out on that. Like, there's some research that says yes, they can. There's some research that says no, they cannot. There's definitive answers in both directions. But what I would say is that people can become dependent on it, where they rely on it to give them this feeling that they feel like they need. And really, no one wants to be tethered to something and dependent on something to give them a feeling that they could get through other means, just it might be a little more difficult. So what you can do is maybe show them this video and have a discussion about what marijuana is doing in the brain and where that dopamine rush comes from and what that dopamine rush can do. Then you can discuss what are some fun, rewarding, pleasurable things that you like to do. And let's see if we can find more ways to do those things. That way your brain can get the dopamine that it needs without us relying on and becoming dependent on a substance. Another thing you can do as a parent is be your child's dopamine. So as they're working on the homework, just know their brain is not giving them that flood of dopamine. You can rush in and you can be like, oh, wow, you got another one done. Oh, good job. Oh, my goodness. Look at you working so hard. I see you read another page. Wow. Oh, good job. Woohoo. And as you cheer them on, that will become their brain's dopamine because you are offering it to them manually. You are doing manually for them what their brain isn't able to do automatically. And then over time, their brain can learn to do it more and more automatically. If you rely on marijuana, the brain does not learn to do it more and more automatically. As a matter of fact, it starts to do it less and less automatically because it says, well, we've got the big rush of dopamine coming a little bit later anyway. Hopefully that was helpful, understanding the connection between ADHD and dopamine, and also a little bit of an aside about munchies. If you found this content helpful, exciting, informative, make sure to like this video and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on all of the mental health fun. All right, I have one more question for today. You all have been great. Yes, I see people on YouTube. I see people on Instagram. I see people on Facebook. Wow. Thank you all so much for tuning in and for writing your questions in, for staying focused. Let's go to the final question for today. Here we go. Dear Mr. Stu, my 7-year-old has been getting really upset during transitions at school, and his teacher feels he's just being stubborn or difficult. But at home, he's such a sweet kid, and I don't feel like he's doing this to be defiant. How can I help his teacher see his behavior differently and find ways to support him without assuming he's just being difficult? This one comes up far too often. Kids are doing the best they know how to do. And we just have to believe that about them, that they are working as hard as they possibly can, even when they're being disruptive, even when they're making choices that we completely disagree with, even when they're doing things that we feel like we have reminded them 1,000 times are not the best choice. They are doing the best they know how to do. Bad kids don't exist. Bad kids don't exist. Just remember it. So let's talk just a little bit about this. Children's behavior is the way that they communicate. So if a child is having trouble, especially if they're having trouble consistently with something, what that means is they're trying to tell you that this is difficult for them. Or they're trying to tell you there's some reason they don't like this thing. It's not about trying to force them to follow the guideline. It's about trying to figure out, okay, where's that coming from? How can we shift some of that or let them know that it's okay? If this child is having trouble during transitions, there can be all sorts of reasons for that. It could be that they were really enjoying the thing that they were doing before, and it's hard to give it up and want to move to something that's less pleasurable for them. It could be that they have some anxiety about it and they don't know what's to come, but they felt like they were doing this one just fine and now they're going to have to get ready for the next thing. It could be that when they walk in the hall, there's some sort of light or sound or smell or something that just bothers them as they're walking in the hallway. It could be any number of things, but none of those things is this child just likes to be defiant. It doesn't exist. Bad kids don't exist. There's even a disorder that's called oppositional defiant disorder. It's ODD. That just, for a lot of reasons, people have labeled children with this ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, as just being, they just like to be defiant. They just like going against the grain. That is not what's going on in ODD. I won't get into that just now, but there's even another one that's just called conduct disorder. And conduct disorder is where a child is showing a pattern of disruptive and dangerous behaviors that seem to come out of nowhere. Guess what? It's not from out of nowhere. There's a reason for it. So no child just loves being defiant, and they would not be happier any other way than just defiant. That is not the case. So reframe that. Then try to see if you can find out what's going on. Is it, you said during transitions at school, but is it the same transition every day, or is it every single transition? Is it just when they're going to one certain class? Is it just when they're switching from one certain subject? As you ask more questions about, okay, tell me more about their difficulty with transitions. What it could be is, well, they do great when they're going to lunch or going to science or going to recess or going to math class, but when they have to do social studies, they lose control. Great. Now we know there's something up with social studies. So is it the teacher that's teaching social studies? I'm not saying that the teacher is bad. I'm saying, is there something about the teacher that makes the child feel uncomfortable? Is there something in the hallway that the child is walking to this certain class? Is it something about the material that the child is learning? I can tell you I had a difficulty at a time in my life because there was a class I went to and there were some really scary things that they shared. I thought they were really scary. Other people were fine with it. But for me, they were really scary. Well, guess what? The next day, I didn't want to go back to that class. Now, I had some fantastic teachers who figured out what happened. They supported me and they helped me get there and they helped me sit through it and they debriefed with me afterwards. It was great. I still had to meet the expectation of going to the class. But we figured out, oh, it's because I experienced this thing that was really scary for me. I don't want to put myself through that again. There's a difference there. So see if you can ask more questions and really turn it into this collaborative effort where it's like, okay, I hear you saying that they have struggle with transitions, but that can mean a lot of things. Can you be more specific? So let's talk about what behaviors are they showing? What are the circumstances surrounding the transition? Did they get a heads up that the transition is about to happen? There could be any number of things, but guess what? None of those things are. This child is just bad, loves being bad, and loves making adults in their life feel miserable. That child doesn't exist. Bad kids don't exist. And if you'll remember that, then you can really focus on, okay, describe to me specifically what you see during transitions, which transitions, where are they going, where are they coming from? And once you understand the system surrounding it, you can find better ways to support that child. Do not ever believe that there is a bad kid doing bad things just because they like doing bad things. Bad kids don't exist. If this answer was helpful for you, hopefully it was. If it was, make sure you like the video and subscribe so you don't miss out and so that you can help other people find this content as well. It helps me a ton. We got to talk about a lot today. We talked about, we talked about not giving medication too much credit. We talked about people not trying to diagnose themselves, but still validating thoughts and feelings. We talked about not trying to control kids, but teaching kids to control themselves. We talked about marijuana, munchies, and ADHD. And we talked about a reminder that bad kids don't exist, but kids who need support do exist. And guess what? That's every child who's ever lived. So we can't say, oh, I don't know if I can support them. I've got 29 other kids in the class. Well, guess what? The 29 other kids need support too. We can find ways to support them all through different means. And sometimes through the same means. Yes, there could be kids that need some individual supports and stuff, but we've got to just build more supportive environments that just kind of help people in all facets of life with all different diagnoses, all different help that they need. There are certain things that you can build in, like patience and peace of the environment and predictability of following a routine. Those things are helpful to all children. And if you'll implement those things, it's not like, oh, well, I can't do this for the one kid. It's not for the one kid. It's for all the kids because all of them need supports. Support kids. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And hopefully these insights were helpful. If they were, make sure that you like this video and subscribe, whether you are watching on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Also, this podcast is available on Spotify. So if you're listening or watching there, make sure that you subscribe. I'm here almost every Friday at 3 p.m. for live Q&A. And if you ever want to join live, you can write your questions in, and I'm happy to answer those as well. Until next time, remember, some things exist, some things don't. Bad kids don't exist. And if you are someone who is hosting an event or needs a training for staff to help remind them that bad kids don't exist, or maybe you just need some pep talks or some skills or some techniques to be more helpful, I love helping adults better understand kids to create environments where kids and their caregivers thrive. If that sounds like a good fit for you and your next event or the training that you might need, please reach out. Please reach out to me. You can find me at badkidsdon'texist.com, and badkidsdon'texist.com/booking is where you can find all the information to hire me as a keynote speaker or a workshop leader. I would love to hear about your next event and make that next event a great one. Remember, some things exist, some things don't. Bad kids don't exist. See you again next time. Peace.